Count Dracula.
This is Mike Price, author of the Forgotten Horrors series of movie history books. Our topic here is an unforgotten but decidedly horrific horror from the Hammer Films factory, Dracula, Prince of Darkness, from 1965-1966. Here we have a reminiscent ramble occasioned by my visits with the star player, Christopher Lee, during a book promotion tour that he and I shared in 1999. Our common ground lay in my having followed Lee's Dracula series since my schoolboy days of the late 1950s, not to mention Lee's having cropped up as an incidental player in the late George Turner's and my 1975 sequel to Forgotten Horrors, a collection of essays on movie villains called Human Monsters. One selection is a 1949 British film called Obsession, also known as The Hidden Room, in which Christopher Lee, at age 27, can be seen briefly as a police constable investigating an abduction.
Well, the doctor's not here.
Well, what do we do?
Clear our cars away and hang around here in case he shows up. I'll go and take a look in his consulting room. That's funny.
This is the switch here.
Obsession would be my first experience with Hollywood-style filmmaking, Lee added, noting the presence in England of U.S. director Ed Dmytryk during a period of exile. Lee paused, then asked, "But how ever could you have recognized me?" He seemed genuinely astonished. Lee had rendered himself, in the first place, impossible to ignore by virtue of stubborn persistence. And then he had proved eminently recognizable during 1957 and 1958 with two daring assignments, Hammer's matched set of The Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula, alias Horror of Dracula. The risk of genrefied typecasting paid off in the attention and bankability that he received. But Lee played the risk strategically by resisting a Frankenstein sequel for himself, and then balking at a Dracula sequel while retaining a lasting identification with Hammer Films. Both sequels came together without Lee, but Hammer's persistence at restoring him to the Dracula role kept negotiations until 1965. Although The Brides of Dracula, the follow-through of 1960, had performed disappointingly at the box office, a return to the franchise for Lee seemed practically a guarantee of heightened return on investment. And hence Dracula, Prince of Darkness, director Terence Fisher's sublime continuation of his identification with the story. The reunion of Fisher and Lee is sufficient to generate a commanding new story. The collaborative screenplay by Jimmy Sangster and Anthony Hines, with John Sampson, takes a striking new tangent off Sangster's matched set of the first two Hammer Draculas. And Michael Reed's camera work matches the sumptuous, lingering work of Jack Asher on the first two installments. The resulting poetic elegance generates an unaccustomed tension in context with the increasing level of gruesomeness. A prologue recaps the finale of 1958's Horror of Dracula, as Peter Cushing's vampire stalker, Van Helsing, destroys Count Dracula with a blast of sunlight. The story begins amid a new plague of vampirism in the village of Carlsbad.
You shame the cloth you wear.
We can't take any chances.
Chances? What chances? This child died. You understand that, man of God? She died.
Andrew Keir appears as an authoritarian priest, Sandor, seemingly certain of the demise of Dracula, yet anxious to discourage visitors. A party of English tourists, ignoring the priest's warning, finds themselves welcomed inexplicably to the castle of the defunct Count Dracula.
Why didn't you make your presence known sooner?
I was unpacking your cases. I trust the rooms are satisfactory.
Yes, admirable. But I don't understand. None of us do.
My master's hospitality is renowned.
A treacherous butler, Philip Latham, turns one of their number, Charles Tingwell, into a blood donor, his cringe-inducing demise essential to the resurrection of Dracula's ashes. Two guests, Charles and Diana Kent, played by Frances Matthews and Suzanne Farmer, resist Dracula's infiltration long enough to ally themselves with Sandor, who takes them to his abbey. When rebuffed by the local monks, the revived Dracula finds an inmate named Ludwig, Thorley Walters, willing to admit him, the better to begin a new campaign of recruitment. Fellow traveler Helen Kent, Barbara Shelley, has become a vampire in Dracula's thrall.
Now bear in mind, Mr. Kent, this woman is not your sister-in-law. She's dead. This is the shell, and what it contains is pure evil.
Charles Kent and Sandor rally against Dracula, who has abducted Diana. She is rescued, none too soon, from an icebound moat. Andrew Keir fills a Van Helsing-like function here, playing the fascist priest as more a punisher than a rescuer. Christopher Lee communicates only in a panther's hissing snarl, his response, as he told it, to what he considered trite and fatuous dialogue, quoting here, which I refused to speak. Scenarist Sangster often objected to Lee's dismissal by explaining, "I didn't write him any dialogue to begin with. Vampires are not known for their loquaciousness, you know." Further revelations of the uniquely Hammer-style Dracula franchise would follow promptly with Dracula Has Risen from the Grave in 1968, and we will be arriving there presently. Until then, this is Mike Price, signing off.
Bring her to me!
Please let me in. Cold out here. So cold.